How do you set bid adjustments for placements in Amazon ads, both for sponsored products and sponsored brands? I just got asked that question by a colleague, and I want to share with you the screencast that we made showing the exact numbers that we saw in the campaign and the precise calculations we made in order to make our adjustments. I'm David Goldenberg, a 20-year digital marketing vet. I recently led the marketing for a brand that I grew from 30 million a year to 57 million a year. And I started my PPC agency, 11 Ads for Brands, based on that.
So we have this campaign which has much better performance on rest of search than on top of search in terms of the conversion rates and the return on ad spend. Interesting note, Amazon isn't showing me the option to get ACOS among the columns, just return on ad spend. So I've got 4.88, that's about a 20% ACOS, for those of you familiar with those terms, and this is 2.74, that's over 30%, maybe close to 40%. So the question is, how do I adjust my bids over here for these different placements, and how do I adjust the other keywords in order to get more of this traffic and to get less of this traffic which is not performing so well, in spite of basically paying the same amount on a cost per click basis. So what I'm going to do is I go to my ad group, click targets, and what I want to do is I want to focus especially on those that have a good ACOS or good return on ad spend, and especially those that are selling the most for me, because it doesn't help me to look at something that generated 2 or 3 sales. I need to look at the stuff that's generating, the targets generating the bulk of the business. So this one over here is around 17.7% ACOS, is at 29, this is 23. So in the first place anyway, it looks like this needs to be lowered, and this we already lowered. You can see that the CPC was $1, now we're bidding 85 cents. So yes, in theory, sponsored brands, they can raise your bid, but the chances are this is just because we lowered our bid since this ACOS was high. It's possible also this bid was higher, I should check that. And this one also looks either like we lowered our bid and then the ACOS recently got better, or something else. So in order to first check the history, we've got a duplicate of this. We're going to go to the ad group and then to the ad group history, and that will tell us whether the bids were just recently changed or not, so I don't duplicate work. And what we're going to do is we're going to calculate what we want to be able to spend on a cost per click basis, what I call the allowable cost per click. And then we need to work backwards from there how to adjust the keyword bid down and the placement bid up for rest of search, so that essentially we get an affordable cost per click on top of search, an affordable ACOS I mean, and a obviously affordable but also profitable ACOS on a rest of search, so that we can maximize our share of that traffic. So looking at this real quick, this is that keyword. We raised it a couple weeks ago. We raised this a couple weeks ago, and I don't see that the other one was changed unless I'm missing something. Or it happened a while ago, possibly. Okay, so if I come back over here, if my target ACOS for this group is basically 18%, so this cost per click is really what I want to get. The problem is that some of these clicks are actually coming from top of search and not really contributing to my sales so much, and the rest of search are basically subsidizing those clicks. So if I have, let's say, a 30% or 35% ACOS over here, because that's what the ad is getting, So I need to figure, if I want to get this down to about 20%, I'll need roughly the cost per click to be a half. This is just rough math to make things simple. So if my cost per click here is $1.61, really I'm able to only pay about 80 cents based on the conversion rates we're getting on top of search. Therefore, I need my bid over here to be a little bit above 80 cents, right? Maybe like 90, 91 cents, something like that. And I need to give a very high bid adjustment for rest of search. Now, if I cut this in half, you would say then my rest of search adjustment should be plus 50%, right? That's the theory. However, in reality, I need the bid adjustment to be higher. Why? Because the weight of the keyword bid is much greater than the weight that Amazon gives to your bid adjustment for placement. They're not seen the same way. If I bid $1 in my keyword bid, or if I bid 50 cents and then plus 100% in order to basically double that to $1 with a placement adjustment, it's more like I've just increased it to, let's say, 75 cents, something like that, because they just want to use that when they're pretty confident you're going to convert, something along those lines. Even though they don't call it dynamic up and down, that seems to be similarly what is happening when you use those placement adjustments. And therefore, in order to really get to $1.61 on my rest of search bid, what I need to do is adjust, let's say, by 120, 130% for rest of search. So now I'm going to bring this down to 0.8. And what this does, it's going to set my base bid not just for rest of search, but also for top of search. Excuse me, I don't want to do 80 cents. I want to do a little bit over that. So I have a bit of a gap between my bid and the target allowable cost per click. And then I go back to my bid adjustments at the campaign level. I need to click placements because by default it goes to audiences. And what I need to do is now I need to raise this by 130%. Now I'm not done. Obviously I need to go back and adjust my other keyword bids in the same way, right? Obviously those that have a higher ACoS I'll need to adjust more strongly, and those that have a better ACoS I can be more liberal in giving them higher bids. That's the general approach that you want to follow in setting your placement adjustments, both for sponsored brands, but also if you're doing this for sponsored products. Now, that first example was a little bit easier because the ACoS here is right around my target ACoS. What happens if my target ACoS is much lower than the actual ACoS on a keyword? So over here I'm around 29.7%, we can call it 30%, and my target ACoS is 18%. So if I just round that to 20%, then this means I'm basically about a third higher, or actually 50% higher than I need to be. If I want to be around 20%, right? 18% really, but we're rounding up to 20 to make the math easier. And over here I'm at around 30%, so you can see that as 50% higher than 20, or I need to bring this down by a third relative to where I am now, right? 1/3 of 30% off would bring you down to 20%. So if I take $1.73, and again, just to keep the math easy, I round this, let's say it's $1.80. So a third of that would be 60 cents, right? 60 cents times 3 would be $1.80. So I need to take out about 60 cents from this bid, and that in theory would get me to about 20% I would probably want to do a little bit more than 60 cents in order to get to my target. But then, you need to adjust up because there's usually a gap between what you bid and what you pay in practice. I notice here though that we're bidding $1.73 and paying $1.68, so there's not a huge gap. So I'm not too concerned by that. Right? It's like a 5-cent gap. It's virtually zero. And then the other consideration, besides for the fact that I need to lower this to get to my target ACOS, I also need to lower it further because the top of search bid needs to be about 50% lower. As we said earlier, my ACOS there is around 50%. I want to be around 20%. Sorry, it's around 40%. I need to be around 20%. Therefore, I need to be paying about half the amount on top of search. And so what this means is that I need to get this to first my logical bid in order to achieve my allowable cost per click. And then that logical bid basically needs to be cut in half because of the top of search and rest of search difference. And then once we bring it down further, then the rest of search bid adjustment can kick in and help us get more of that good performing traffic and help us to decrease the expense on the lower performing traffic top of search. So first of all, let's take out, let's say 65 cents. So that would leave us with $1.08, just doing some mental math. But now from $1.08, we need to go down by roughly 50%, we said. We'll do we'll cut a bit less than 50% because we don't want to get it too low and then just lose all the traffic. By mistake, I call this the salami method. Instead of adjusting bids to exactly where you want to go, you do a little bit higher, and that helps you to remain competitive. And also, your conversion rates are never fixed. There's always some variation. So if in fact it's a little bit higher than what you just saw in the recent period, then you've helped to get where you really want to be. So this is about $1.10. I would need to cut off 55 cents. Suppose I cut off 50 cents. So we'll call it 0.63. Okay, so that's a little bit over the 50% mark. And then in my bids, as I was showing you before, I made a rest of search adjustment to 130%. And so when you add that over here, that makes this bid for rest of search only $1, let's see, 100% would take us to $1.26. And another 30% of that is roughly another 21 cents. So we're talking about $1.47 bid in practice, but only for rest of search. And that reasonably should get us either a CPC of $1.32 or a little bit higher than that. And that is how you can approach things when your bid is actually above your target for any placement really, but when your ACOS, not your bid, excuse me, when your ACOS is above what you're actually trying to achieve, this is how you do the calculation. You first need to figure out what your bid should be if there weren't any placement adjustments, and then you cut it down further so that the lowest performing placement gets the lower bid, right? That is your base bid on the keyword, and then you adjust higher on the placement.